recording there. Okay, so I'm going to start off, and today is very, very important. I really wanted everyone to be on board it because we are starting off security valuation, and it is going to act as a basis for multiple chapters like portfolio management and mutual funds. We'll try to keep a deeper understanding on the basics in today's session, so that the bigger questions, if at all there is any bigger questions that anybody has, they can address it in the next session. Okay. So I'll just first, let me tell you guys what's the agenda for today's discussion. And I have kept like three parts of the discussion for today. Let's see how much we are able to complete. And this is the easier part of valuation discussion that we are going to have. Okay, we do have multiple models of valuation that is available. So we are going to discuss about valuation of different type of securities. When I'm saying different type of securities, I'm saying that you do have valuation of equity, we do have valuation of preference shares, we do have valuation of debentures or bonds. Okay, so any security that we value, the fundamental concept that we have remains the same. So few of the parameters, okay, few of the components of computation would change according to the type of security that we are going to value. Okay, if we are valuing equity, we would have certain items that we are going to do, but the mechanism would remain across all valuation irrespective of what kind of securities that we are valuing. You know that there are multiple type of securities. So investments are generally I'm giving you, investments are generally classified into different categories. Okay, so there are few terms which we do not use it in Indian scenario. We generally use it in international terms. So we say that okay, there are different type of securities. First type of security is a fixed income security. What do you mean by fixed income security? It generally gives you a fixed coupons. Okay, so interest with respect to fixed income securities, the interest is generally called in international terms as coupons. Coupon means interest. So what could be this fixed income securities? Your debentures could be a fixed income security. A bond could be a fixed income security. So why are we calling these as fixed income securities? Because it always gives you a fixed income over the period of time. But that does not mean that this security will not be available in the market at a different price. It can be. That could be new information because we do not generally have a lot of discussion that's going on bond market. We do have a bond market in India also, where you can purchase and sell your bonds. Okay, there could be corporate bonds that is available. There is government bond. That is something that you would have heard of. Government of India bonds gives you this much of yield. So there are different type of bonds, but not every participants like an retail investor like you and me. If you want to invest, if I want to invest, there is not a platform where you can directly do that. So we will have to take the route of mutual funds in most of the time to get to a debt market. We will discuss on all that, but I'm saying this is the basis for all this. So these categories of investment is called as fixed income securities. Then we do have securities in the terms of equity. Okay. Fixed income like include fixed income can be even preference shares. We can call at times as fixed income because it gives you a preference over the distribution, and they're fixing you a percentage of profit that you're going to get. So apart from this fixed income, we do have something called as equity. That is another segment of investment that is open for people. Okay, so equity means your equity shares, and that is something that we all know because it's heavily traded in across every market. We have seen in the previous chapter security analysis that which are the stock exchanges that we do have where equity is generally listed and traded in large volume. Okay, so equity needs valuation. So we have option. When I have some money with me, I have option. I can invest in fixed income, I can invest in equity, and there is something called as commodity. And we call commodities, futures, and options and everything in one term called as derivative. So the third market that people can look at is derivative market. So we do have fixed income market, equity market, derivative market. Okay, so these are the three markets in which people can pool their investment into. And there are multiple options in which we will approach this. That options are being discussed in portfolio management, mutual fund method. So there are different chapters which is revolving around this. Okay, and mostly you should understand that all of these are computations, but every computation will be backed with a concept, and that concept has to be sliced and put it into a very small structure. Okay, so you should not have a very complicated structure in which you are approaching a particular concept. We can have scientific methods being used. If you remember, we have done a run test in the last session that I have conducted. I did a run test and I told you about distributions and then things like that. But I don't want you to dive deeper into that and then complicate your entire learning, because it's when you come to very complicated technical terms, you learn the method and then close it there. Okay, that's more than sufficient. And if you're too much interested, you can go and start learning, quantitative techniques. Then, but the basic concepts are all simple to understand, backed up with the proper logic. Okay. So equity we have, derivative we have, fixed income we have. Apart from that, all other investments would be generally called as alternate investment. To give you an example of an alternate investment, could be a house, a real estate investment. Okay, so that's also an investment, right? So you have different methods in which you can actually keep your money. Okay, different markets we have. And one very important point in which why are we keeping investments here? We wanted to ensure that we are beating something called as inflation. So in fundamental analysis, we had this discussion. We discussed about Mr. Rakesh, if you remember, and I told you that okay, Mr. Rakesh has cash with him, which is a dead asset, which because it is not going to grow after 1 year. If you keep the same cash with you, after 1 year you're going to have the same cash, but the value of this particular cash, the real value of this particular cash would have gone down because of something called as inflation. So you will have to definitely make sure that you beat inflation, and you will have to ensure that you generate a return which is higher than that. To ensure that you generate a return higher than that, you need to actually see which are those investments which are underpriced. Are you guys understanding? Okay, there we have seen a lot of concepts. Okay, wherein we discussed about equity markets, and we said there are certain cases, you know, there are certain people which believe that there is no underpricing. Okay, we said efficient market hypothesis, something like that. We have discussed few concepts and everything. Okay, so we have seen the method in which we can actually look into a market in different concepts. But the very basic understanding is that to look at something as an investment, we need to know how much will be the real value of it, and then you have to decide something is underpriced or overpriced. That's how I make a decision on whether to buy that particular asset and then keep it in my portfolio of assets. Okay, so whenever I'm using the word portfolio, you think about it, I have a basket full of investment. So I am deciding whether one set of securities should be a part of my basket of investment. So that decision comes from the very basic understanding of fundamental analysis. What was the fundamental analysis structure that we said? We need to first calculate the intrinsic value, which is valuation. Then we will have to do an EIA analysis, in economic analysis, industry analysis, company analysis, EIC analysis. Sorry, EIC analysis we will have to look at. Okay. Now the first part of computing value or intrinsic value computation, comparing it with the actual value, making a decision. For this, there are empty number of methods in which we can do this computation. And that is what we are going to discuss in security valuation chapter. And there are a lot of interesting formulas different people researched upon and then they have found out. But the concept remains the same. So in this particular session, we are going to discuss about what is the fundamental concept of valuation of equity, preference share, debentures. Also in this particular initial chapter, we are going to discuss as something called as arbitrage pricing theory. Okay, what does that arbitrage pricing theory means? What do you mean by arbitrage, and what is the theory of arbitrage pricing? Okay, so this is something that we're going to discuss. So We are going to start with the very basic understanding. Okay, so just to ensure you guys are there on chat box, because I have literally no clue how many of you guys are there. So can I go ahead, guys? I'm asking you a question so that I'll know that okay, few of them are there. This time I'm not doing it with my camera. Okay, so let me start with a very basic question that I have for all of you, which is, what is value of an asset? How do you determine value of an asset? So, what's the need for valuation? I have already told you the very basic need for valuation is to determine what is the intrinsic value of an asset. What do you mean by intrinsic value? We had discussed intrinsic value concept and we said intrinsic value is basically the real value of an asset. Yeah. So the real value of an asset, and this real value of an asset is required for me to determine whether an asset is underpriced or overpriced. This is the very basic understanding. Now, how do you determine value of an asset? And this is the fundamental concept. I can repeat this 1,000 times also, but I want you to remember this fully always. Okay. So there are two type of assets we do have. One is physical asset, another one is financial asset. Now, physical asset could be your real estate, and financial assets could, or real estate, your car, your house, okay, your gold, everything could be your physical asset. Or financial assets could be your securities like your shares, debentures, mutual funds. Okay, all that you are holding as financial asset. So you could have two type of assets. And how do you derive the value? So when you're going and acquiring this asset, somebody has offered you a value. You will have to validate it now. So when you go and find out, okay, you wanted to purchase an house for investment purpose. Okay, in Cochin, you wanted to purchase a house for investment purpose. You're looking into a flat, and what's your objective? You wanted to generate a rental income out of it. So it's like an investment purpose. You don't want to stay there. Okay. So if you are purchasing it as an investment purpose, then how do you say, okay, say the customer is the house owner or the builder is telling you that you will have to pay 2 crore for that particular flat. Now you checked in how much will be the rental income that you will get if you rent it out. And you understand that, okay, you will get 10,000 rupees a rent. Then you would think, okay, if I'm getting only 10,000 per month, then why I have to buy a 2 crore worth house? So there is some valuation that you're actually doing on back of your mind, which without even actually knowing that you're doing the valuation. So how much is the true value of an asset is called as intrinsic value. Okay, so intrinsic value is totally different from market price. It can be different from market price. Intrinsic value can be market price. Market price can be higher than intrinsic value. It can be lower than intrinsic value, because we know that there are a lot of factors that will be additionally affecting the market additionally affecting the asset when it comes to market price. Okay, there are a lot of differences, that discounting differences that we will have. So that is where we will identify whether an asset will be worth it or not. Now, what do you mean by market price? How can we define a market price? So first is, how much is the true worth of an asset is called as intrinsic value. So an asset is worth 100 rupees, but it's not necessary that in the market you will have it for 100. Now the market could be either selling it at 90 or it would be selling at 110. If there is no one to purchase, they would even go down to 90. So how much a person is ready to pay for that asset is called as the market price. So it is not necessarily the true value of that particular asset. Okay, these are the two terms that I want to tell you, is that it is different. Okay, so intrinsic value equal to market value can be one situation. It can be higher, it can be lower. Any situation is possible. So what is intrinsic value? How much is the true value of an asset? So whenever you are having a question of valuation, You're actually determining what value? Intrinsic value. Okay, so it not necessarily be the market price, but in there are certain assumptions which we use in valuation. We'll treat, sometimes we will treat both of this to be same because we don't have enough information. Okay, but in reality you should understand intrinsic value is something that we compute, market value is that is available in the market. So we identified the intrinsic value of this particular house that I'm going to purchase, which is going to give me 10,000 monthly rental income, would be only 30 lakhs. But in the market, it is available at 2 crores. Are you understanding? So there are people, there is huge demand for that particular property. That is why they are pricing it at 2 crores. Could be the reason. Are you guys with me? Okay. So intrinsic value is the true value and market price is what you are ready to pay. Okay. Now let's take an example to understand this. So how much you will be ready to pay depends on what you're going to get in the future as inflows. Okay. So for any asset, you decide the value based on what is your future cash inflows. So every investment that you're seeking should give you some return. So what are the returns that you will have from an investment? First one would be a periodic return, which if you take different investment, you will have different set of periodic returns. So when you're taking house as an example, rent was the periodic return I'm going to get. Now, when you're taking equity shares, what is the periodic return that you will get? Equity shares will give you a return called as dividend. What about bond? What about bond and debentures? It will give you a return called as interest, or we call it as coupon. Are you understanding? So, okay, this is the periodic return. Now, is this the only return that you're going to get? No, because after some point, you're going to sell this asset. Okay, say house, I am selling it. I'm planning to sell this asset after 5 years. So after 5 years, for the 5 years, I'll get rental income. After the 5th year, I'm going to get an additional income called as redemption value. Similarly, I'm going to hold this asset. I'm going to hold this equity share for, say 5 years. And each year I'm going to get dividend. And at the end of 5th year, I'm going to sell this particular stock, which will give me a redemption value. So basically, whenever you're putting money now, this is almost like a decision that we're going to do in capital budgeting. Capital budgeting, if you've learned, okay, I know that not everybody likes capital budgeting, but if you know, then you will easily understand this. You are looking into what are the cash flows that's coming to you. You do have periodic cash flows that's coming in for every investment, and you do have something called as terminal value, or we call it as redemption value. So every asset will have a periodic return and a redemption value, and what you're going to pay today depends upon how much you're going to get periodically and how much will be the value of this particular asset at the time you're selling this particular asset. Okay, this is how you will determine something called as value. So it depends on, that is what I have told till now. Okay. Now let's look at this with some numbers. Say you're planning to purchase an asset today which is promising rupees 100 per annum for next to 4 years, and at the end of 4th year you're going to receive a redemption of 1200. Okay. So what are the cash flows that you have? To give you an easier understanding, I'm going to take few numbers for that sake. Okay, so it says you have 4-year plan of investment. You're going to be in this particular investment for 4 years. And you're going to have some return that you're going to get from this. So what is the return that you're going to get? 4 years, you're going to get 100 rupees as your cash flow. What is this called as? This is called as periodic return. Now, is this the only return that you're going to get? No. At the end of year 4, you're going to get 1200, which we call as redemption value. So what is the understanding of this? So when you are looking into investing in something today, so when are you investing? At year 0, you're going to make a decision of investment. Okay, and this investment will have some value. Let's call it as X value. This is the value that you have for this investment. Now, if you invest X value today, what is that your return is going to be like? At year 1, you're going to get 100. Year 2, you're going to hit 100. Year 3, you're going to hit 100. Year 4, you're going to get 100. At year 4 end, you're actually selling the asset. At that time, you're going to get 1200 as the redemption value. Now, can I add this and tell that, okay, so if this is the case, then today you will have to pay periodic return. I'm getting 400 plus 1200 I'll get at the end of year 4. So you can pay today 1600 rupees for this particular asset. Am I correct on this particular decision? Am I correct? The answer is no. What is the problem that we have in this computation? Can I say 1600 is the value? Of course, I know that my value today will depend upon how much is the future periodic return as well as future redemption value. But can I add all that and say that today's value would remain at that? This is why we have taken an initial chapter which was actually not dealt in CA final, but we had discussed about time value of money in the initial discussion that we were having for SFM. I have given you that very basic understanding on this, and we told that we cannot really compare different value of money at different time period. Thereby, what I have to do is that I have to calculate what will be the present value of these future returns. And to calculate this present value, I require something called as discount rate. So I will fix my return percentage, and I'll say that, okay, this is the fundamental concept, guys. So if you understand it here, well and good. If you don't understand it here, don't worry. I'm going to keep repeating you examples so that you get to this one understanding that we have. We require all your future periodic returns and redemption value to be brought into present value considering your discount rate. That will be the true value of that particular asset. So any asset we have, value can be summarized in this term. We can say that value is nothing but present value of future cash flows. What is value? Value is equal to present value of future cash flow. Value of any asset. You take any asset, for example, value of any asset would be present value of its future cash flows. Now, what are the future cash flows we do have in discussion? We have two types of future cash flows. One is we have periodic returns. That is something that every asset would offer. Also, it offers a redemption value when I'm selling off that particular asset and exiting. Are you guys clear on whatever we have discussed till now? I just wanted to ensure you're there on the chat box. I know that like 4 or 5 people are only there, but still, I want you to keep typing something on the chat box whenever I'm asking questions so that I would know that you guys are there and listening to me. Okay, so let us go ahead and then understand few additional concepts with regarding to returns. So I told you that I require a discount rate which would be the return that I'm expecting. So there are multiple return concepts we have. So I'm going to introduce you to two different terms for the discussion. One is required rate of return, another one is expected rate of return. What are the two terms that I'm going to discuss? One is required rate of return, another one is expected rate of return. Now it looks completely closer to each other, and as far as an initial reader is concerned, this could be exactly same when you're looking at, okay, required, how much is the required rate of return? So for me to invest in this particular asset, how much is the required rate of return, and how much is that I'm expecting from that particular security? What I require, what I expect should be same, right? But it is not same. This is why we do have a difference between intrinsic value and market price. I can explain you this in detail, but for the time being, you understand that required rate of return and expected rate of return can be different. Because of this difference only, we do have something called as difference in intrinsic value as well as market price. I'll tell you the reason. So for that, first we need to understand something called as concept of valuation. So how do you calculate value? You have to see here, we do have two type of returns coming in. One is periodic return, another one is redemption value. Now this periodic return and redemption value needs to be computed into present value. Present value. So present value of my future cash flows would be my actual intrinsic value. Now for computing intrinsic value, I need a discount rate. So every cash flow, say for example, I'm computing my required rate of return is 10%. So what I want from this investment, or what I want from this investment decision, you can see that this investment decision should give me a return of 10%. So my required rate of return, if I treat that as my discount rate, then I can actually discount all my cash flows using 10%. So all these cash flows I'll have to multiply with present value factor at 10%. I'm assuming that you understood our time value of money concept, and that is why I'm directly jumping onto this present value concept. So I have to discount it using my present value factor. So I will get a value. That will be my value today. Now if I take that as my value, then I can say that if I invest that much amount for 4 years with this particular security, my return would be 10%. Are you guys understanding? This is how we will use the return concept in determining value. So generally it is required rate of return which is considered to be, it is the required rate of return which is considered to be the discount rate for computing value. For the time being, you understand this. But I'm saying that there is required rate of return. There is also one more term called as expected rate of return. Now, required rate of return. What do you mean by required rate of return? Required rate of return is the minimum rate of return that the investor is expected to receive while making an investment in an asset over a specified period of time. It is also called as opportunity cost or cost of capital, because it is the highest level expected return foregone which is available elsewhere from investment of a similar risk. Now the terms definition could be confusing a bit because they are using expected there also as a term. But the concept is very simple. Now every discount rate is generally an opportunity cost. Here also I might be, say for example, if I'm investing in asset A, I cannot invest the money in asset B because I can invest only in one asset. So when I'm moving my decision from asset B to asset A, okay, I can invest in asset A and B. There are two options. Say for example, I have asset A and I have asset B. Now asset B gives me 9% return. Now I'm moving from asset B to asset A. So I'm saying that if I'm moving from this particular asset B, I did not invest in asset B, I'm investing in asset A. Asset A should give me minimum 9% return because that's the bare minimum that I require for me to move from B to A. Or I would say I require something more than 9% because I do have an opportunity cost of 9% already. So this particular asset A by any chance should give me 9% return. Are you guys with me? So it is nothing but opportunity cost or cost of my capital that is required. There are multiple models in which we can compute this cost of capital or opportunity cost. So we should first understand and keep it in our mind. Okay, so what is this whole computation all about? So that's what the method in which I want to discuss this. Okay, what's this whole computation? Now then I'm telling you that, okay, all of this computation is basically computing present value of their future returns. Okay, so for computing present value of future return, what are the components I require? I require cash flow. Okay, you require cash flow. So what are the cash flows I have? I do have periodic returns. I do have redemption value. Then what is that I require? I require discount rate. For that I have something called as required rate of return. How do I compute required rate of return? We can treat it as cost of capital. We call this as KE in. This is something that you would have learned in intermediate. Cost of capital, we represent it as KE. There's a chapter like cost of capital there. Okay. So we will require cash flow and discount rate, and we can easily get into something called as present value. Now, what is this required rate of return? We can say that this is the minimum rate of return that is expected to be received while making an investment. Or we can say this is the opportunity cost or cost of capital of the alternate investment that I have. Are you guys understanding? Okay. Now, how is it different from expected rate of return? Expected rate of return reflects the perception of the investor. So basically, the investor expects a return of a particular share higher than required rate, then the share is undervalued. The reason is that the share will sell for a less value than intrinsic value. On the other hand, if the investor expects a return of a particular share lower than its required rate of return, then the share is overvalued. The reason is that it will sell for a higher price than the intrinsic value. I want you to read this at one moment you take and then you read this, because this is one concept that you should definitely understand, then only you will be able to go further. Because here is when I'm going to differentiate between market price and intrinsic value totally. So I'm telling you that required rate of return is generally I'll use as a discount rate to compute what value? What value I'm using it? I'm using this to compute something called as intrinsic value, true value. Now, expected rate of return is from the perspective of investor, how much he is willing to pay for this. The true value could be 100, but he is willing to pay not 100, he is willing to pay 120, or he is willing to pay only 80 because of some reasons. Now, I want you to read this once and then give me a yes so that I would know that you guys are there with me, so that I can go ahead and explain you this concept. Read it, guys. I'm going to give you an example. Okay, wonderful. Now let me give you very simple understanding with an example here. Say your required rate of return is 10%, which means you're investing at a value of 100. It should give you a return of 10. Clear? If your required rate is 10%, if you're investing 100, it should give you a return of 10. But your expected return is not 10%. Say it is somewhere about 12%. Or we'll take 20%. It will be easier for you to compute. Okay, now these are all breaking barriers in someone's head. Okay, like this is something new that they are going to do. We are basically playing with discounting. That's all. Okay, I'm going to just play with the discounting. Very good at discounting and present value. Then this is a cakewalk for you. All the concepts are a cakewalk for you. So what I'm saying is that here a required rate of return is 10%, and that is why the true value of this asset, which gives you a fixed return of 10 rupees, okay, which gives you a fixed return of 10 rupees, is priced correctly at 100. Again, I'll repeat that sentence so that you can, bifurcate and then see each one of it. My required rate of return is 10%, and this particular security gives rupees 10 as return, which is fixed. Thereby, the security is truly valued at 100. So if you invest 100, you get 10 rupees return. Your required rate of return is 10%. Are you guys clear? So similarly, this company gives you 10 rupees dividend every time. And if you want 10%, then 100 rupees is what you should pay for that particular security. That's a true value. But wherein the investor expectation has to be 20%. But how much is the return that you will get? Only 10. This is the dividend that the company is generally giving you, or this is the dividend that the security is generally giving you. Now the question is, will you be ready to pay rupees 100 for this particular security? Will you be ready to pay 100? Now if you pay 100, your return percentage would be 10%. Now instead you are saying that I will be ready to pay only 50 rupees. Why? If you pay 50 rupees for an investment which gives you rupees 10 as return, then you will have to understand that your percentage of return would be 10 rupee you are getting as return, 50 you have invested, which gives you 20 percentage as your return. Are you guys understanding this? Are you guys understanding? Now the same concept, if you do an opposite, say your expected return is only 5%. The market expects only 5%. The investor is saying, okay, 5% is what I'm expecting. That's the return I'm expecting. But required rate of return happened to be 10%. So the true value of an asset was 100, and this particular asset was giving rupees 10 as the return. But how much return that investor is looking into? Only 5%. So even though the true value is 100, the investor is ready to pay rupees 200 because it gives you a return of 10 rupees. Thereby 10 divided by 200 would be 5%. Are you guys understanding this? Now with this example, let us go ahead and read this particular terms once again. So what do you mean by expected return? Expected return reflects the perception of investor. If the investor expect a return of a particular share which is higher than the required return, then the share is undervalued. The reason is that the share will sell for a less than its intrinsic value. Now, our first example, what was the expected return? It was 20%. What was the required return? 10%. So required return is what is used to determine its real value. Now, the investor says that no, I require 20%. On a security which gives only 10 rupees return, which is having an intrinsic value of 100, the investor fellow says no, I want 20%. Now what is that market will do? So if everybody says I want 20%, then some security which gives you 10 rupees return, it cannot be priced at 100, it can be priced only at 50. So it will be undervalued there. So the true value is 100 because the expected return is different from the required rate of return. Thereby, you do have the value differences on this particular security. Are you understanding? So the same security is undervalued. The true value is 100, but it is valued at 50 there. That is what is the first discussion says. Opposite case. On the other hand, if the investor expects a return of a particular share lower than its required return, I'm expecting only 5%, but this fellow says that it will give you 10%. But then I am expecting only 5%. Then I'll be even ready to pay 200 rupees, which will be overpriced, higher than the intrinsic value. So, if the investor is expecting a return of a particular share lower than its required rate of return, then its share is overvalued. The reason it will sell for a higher price than its intrinsic value. Are you guys clear till now? Whatever I have discussed. So I told you there are two type of terms for the returns. One is required rate of return, which is used for determining the intrinsic value, and sometimes we interchangeably use expected rate of return and required rate of return. But in the concept value, we will have to understand that expected rate of return is from the investor perspective, which says that how much am I ready to pay for this particular security will be based on how much is my expected rate of return, not what my required rate of return. But the true value will be reflecting the discount rate, which is required rate of return. Can I go ahead, guys? This is very important for me to understand. Now, if you understand this, then you know that, okay, if the return is fixed, then I know that the price will differentiate. Depends upon how much return I want. This is one logical understanding you should create in your mind. Okay, if return is fixed, then I should understand that, okay, if return is fixed, my price can be varied. So even if it is a bond or a debenture which gives you a fixed interest rate, the actual price at which I purchase that could vary because of my return expectation. If the entire market has a different return expectation, then the amount that they are ready to pay would be different. Are you guys clear on this? Now I can create an formula, and whenever I'm writing a formula, I want you to copy this. So please take your notes and then start writing the concept expected rate of return and required rate of return. This is the heading, and we are going to number the formulas, because at the end of our discussion we should have, so I already told you that you should have two sides for the notebook, or two separate notebooks. One is for computing and solving questions when we are discussing it, and one is for writing formulas and then the concepts that we have. So keep that only separately in a note, so that we can actually look into, flip through that and then try to understand. It's like a flashcard that we need to have so that you remember it quickly. So simply put in, we can say expected rate of return or call it ER to be required rate of return plus intrinsic value minus market price divided by market price. When I say RRR, it is required rate of return. Please copy this. So if my required rate of return is 10% and you want another 10%, then what will you adjust? You will adjust the market price. Your required rate of return is 10%, but you want only 5%, then you will what you will do? You will adjust the market price. You will be ready to pay more. Are you guys understanding? This is just a concept and it has different implication when we are doing different set of computation. So now I'm only at the terms. We're going to go to different models and we have certain models that we will use when certain information is available in the question. Copy it, guys. I want you guys to put a yes so that I can go ahead. Because few students did not get the stream. As in their when they open and then their course, um, the stream is not available there. They checked, yeah, they checked. I don't know about that, but they checked it on the my course also. They are saying it is not subscribed yet. What is the problem? But this is what they were showing. I can ask them. I hope you guys have copied. Can I go ahead? Okay, let us go to a question and then see how we compute the same. Suppose that the current price of the share of ABC Limited is rupees 30 per share. The investor estimated the intrinsic value of ABC Limited share to be rupees 35 per share with required rate of return 8% per annum. Estimate the expected rate of return on ABC Limited. Compute it at your end and let me know what is the value that you get. So expected rate of return required rate of return plus intrinsic value minus market price divided by market price. What is the required rate of return? 8%. What was the intrinsic value? 35. What is the market price? 30 divided by 30. So 8% plus how much will be that? 5 divided by 30. No, it cannot be 8.17. Should be somewhere about 16, 17% because 30, 10% would be 3. So how much will be the value? So they can revise and tell me. Okay. So that will be 8 plus 16.67%. That gives you 24.67. Or we can take it as 25%. So this would be considered to be the expected rate of return. Okay, cool. So simple computation only. I don't have so much of discussion required there. It's a concept that you will have to understand. The market can adjust its value based on how much is the expectation of the investor. So he will underprice it, overprice it because of that. We have another very important concept, equity risk premium, which I'm going to take you through another concept in a different model. You would have heard of this model called as capital asset pricing model because that's what something people use in cost of capital chapter in your intermediate syllabus. There, yeah, they would have used that model. It's very beautiful model and which is practically used in multiple valuation that we do. Now, what is equity risk premium? I'll give you the real concept of equity risk premium to get you a very basic understanding on this. Very important concept, guys. We will just read like we did for the previous one. We will just read and then see what will be equity risk premium. Equity risk premium is the excess return that the investment in equity shares provides over a risk-free rate, such as return from tax-free government bonds. So, equity risk premium means what? It's an excess return that the investment in equity shares provides over a risk-free rate, such as return from tax-free government bonds. Now, let me explain this with an example. The concept of equity risk premium says that your return that is given to an investor or required rate of return of an investor is basically depends on how much is the risk that he takes. Now, there are different risks for different investment. So, see, in practical, there is nothing called 0% risk. There is nothing called risk free because everything comes with some level of risk. But the closest to zero would be a government bond. Reason, if you invest in a government bond and government bond says that, okay, I'll give you 6% return. It says that 6% return. So there is a very, very low chance, very low chance that this government bond is not able to, government bond won't be able to give you the return. The risk that you don't get this. See, generally, what's the risk that you will have when you invest in a bank? Okay, so if you don't want to take so much of risk, then where will you invest? Like, we will not directly go and invest in government bonds generally. We generally go for fixed deposits, isn't it? Somebody who thinks that, okay, I don't want to take any market fluctuation and risk, I would rather go and invest in fixed deposit. But in finance concept, fixed deposit is never considered to be 0% risk because the bank itself is collapsed, then you don't get the money back. Now, when government will not be able to serve the government bonds, the entire government collapse, then at least they can print money and then give you. Are you guys with me? So we take zero risk when we are investing in government bonds. Let's suppose I'm investing 6%, or if I invest in government bonds, I'm getting 6%, which means that without taking any risk, I'm able to fetch a return of 6%. Now, can I say if you invest in my equity share, then you will get the same level of return? Can I say? Now, let's suppose not government bonds, you are investing in equity share of a particularly listed company. Okay. Instead of investing in government bonds, you are investing in Reliance Industries. Now, can Reliance Industries say that you invest in my equity shares, we will give you a return of 6%? Will you invest? If I'm getting 6%, why should I invest in Reliance? I could have rather gone for 0% risk. So, of course, you will have to offer something higher than what the risk-free return offers. You do have equity market, which is represented by the indices, which could be, say, in India, it is either Sensex or Nifty. So they said if you're investing in Sensex or Nifty, which we know that it's an average of weighted average of multiple stocks. So if you move from government bond and reach at equity, the market itself, on an average, market itself is giving you a higher return. On an average in India, market gives you a return about 15%. How do I calculate this 15%? See, when 1979, when the market started, the index started in India, Sensex started in India, it was priced at 100. Today, when you look at Sensex, it is priced above 30,000. So we know that on a compounded scale, on an average in India, this market is priced at 15% return, considered to be across years. Okay. So 15% is the market return that you're getting. Now, when I'm saying that if I have to make that shift from Government of India bonds to equity market, how much will be the required rate of return that an investor would seek? What will be the cost of capital? So every company will have to minimum give 15%. Are you guys understanding? Now, this is this difference. So Government of India bonds is called as risk-free rate. Return of risk-free asset, which we denote by RF. Now, if I have to move from risk-free rate to an equity market rate, you will have to minimum offer something called as 15%. Now, the difference between these two, Government of India bonds, which is risk-free rate, and equity market, we call this as market premium. Market premium. So, in our example, how much is market premium? Return of the market minus risk-free rate. How much was return of the market? 15%. How much is the risk-free rate? 6%. So how much will be the market premium that we have? 9%. So if you offer 9% in addition, I will be ready to make the shift from Government of India bonds, which is risk-free rate, to the equity market. Are you guys with me on this? Okay. Now, every stock need not have the same risk as the market, which means an individual equity might be either less risky or high risky compared to market. See, I have not really told you what do you mean by return. We have not discussed what do you mean by return and how return is computed, how risk is computed. All this discussion is going to have, we're going to have in the future areas of our entire syllabus. But then for the time being, you should understand that, okay, so there are concepts which swapped here and there. We're trying to, go in that easiest order possible. And plus, I want you to make sure that when you're reading the institute material, you're going ahead with some confidence. So an individual security might be either less risky or more risky. We will put more. That's a better term to use there. That's a better adjective. More risky compared to the market. So if the market gives you return extra, which is called as market premium. Why are you offering premium? Because you're taking a higher risk. The market itself is offering you a premium of 9%. The market is offering you a premium of 9%. Then if the security is more riskier than the market, whether it should offer 9% or it should offer more than 9%. It should offer more than 9%. So the sensitivity, here I'm using another term. The sensitivity of return of a market and return of a security is measured using something called as beta, represented by beta symbol. So we say that an equity can be, like, say, twice riskier than the market, which means they will have a beta of 2. If the equity is same risk of the market, it will have beta of 1. Equity is less riskier than market, then it will have a beta of 0.75 or 0.5, half risky of market. So our understanding is very simple. First I have to move the shift from risk-free rate to a risky rate, which is market, which is equity market. Now equity market offers you a premium, which is nothing but what is the return of the market minus risk-free rate. Now this premium is called as market premium. Now the market premium could be different from an equity premium or equity risk premium. Equity risk premium requires one more additional factor to be considered, which is called as how risky is this security compared to the market. To give you 2 examples, okay, let's take the example of Let's take the example of Hero Honda. Okay, Hero. We don't have Honda now. So Hero Motocorp or Maruti Suzuki. If you every time an example, I'm taking these two stocks because these two stocks, if you analyze or you take HDFC, these companies or TCS, these companies are super strong. Even if the entire market falls 10%, these stocks are not falling that much. But when the market is moving up, it is actually making better returns. So there are stocks which are not so volatile like market. So if the market is offering you 15 percentage, maybe Hero Honda need not offer you 15%. You'll be happy with 10%. Reason? You're taking lesser risk than the average market. So equity market return means it has very risky stock. A very risky stock. Yes Bank. You're trading at 600 one day, you're trading at 30 another day. So you have very risky stocks, also you have less risky stock, and an average would give you 15% return. So the index that we are talking is an average of all the stocks that we have in the market. Now we wanted to go to a specific stock, then I need to know one more additional information, which is what is the sensitivity of this particular individual stock compared to the market. When the market is going up by 10%, is it going up by 20%? Which means that if it is market is going down by 10%, it is going down by 20%. Which means that when the market moves one, it is moving two times of the market. So that sensitivity is measured by a measure called as beta. So considering all this under CAPM, so next you have to copy this also. The heading would be equity risk premium. As per capital asset pricing model, cost of capital aka KE is computed as risk-free rate plus beta times RM minus RF. Or we can say like this, it is risk-free rate plus equity risk premium. Or we can say cost of capital is equal to risk-free rate plus beta times market risk premium. Again, I want always the formulas to be there in your notes. Okay, so whenever there's a term that you don't understand, you will have to put that also on the side. So RF means what? Risk-free rate. This is beta. This is return of the market. If that's the case, what do you mean by equity risk premium? What will be the formula? It will be beta into RM minus RF. Are you guys clear? Please copy this and then give me a yes so that I can go ahead and then discuss the rest. Now let's look at an example question. If the risk-free rate is 5% and beta is 1.5%, market risk premium is 4.5, calculate required rate of return on equity. So what are the information available? RF is equal to 5%, beta is 1.5%, market risk premium is 4.5, okay, beta is 1.5 times, okay, that is how we represent it. So what's the formula that we should use? KE is equal to risk-free rate plus beta into market risk premium is 5% plus 1.5 times 4.5. How much will be that? %5 plus 6.75%, 11.75%. Wonderful. We'll take a 4 to 5 minutes break. I'll quickly resume back. I'll just refill my tea and come. Okay. Don't go anywhere. Just do a few stretching and I'll be quite back. I hope you're clear about this concept. Discussed simple concept only, guys. Can I resume the discussion, guys? Can I resume, everyone? The next concept, I've already told you about this concept, which is discount rate. So why we are using discount rate and what rate we would use, and it depends mostly on what we are computing. Okay, so discount rate is a rate at which present value of future cash flows is determined. We already know that, and it depends on what you're calculating. So if you're calculating market price, I'll have to rather discount it by using expected rate of return. If you're computing intrinsic value, you will have to discount it by using required rate of return. But in some questions, they'll not give you enough information. At that time, you will assume both of them to be same. Discount rate depends on risk-free rate and risk premium of an investment. So here they're talking about cost of capital to be the discount rate. The risk over different time horizon is different, hence the discount rate would also be different. So this is a very interesting concept. But when we are computing, it's not something that we consider. Say, I'll give you. So risk over different time horizon is different, hence the discount rate also would be different, which means that, say, I have different years, 2, 3, 4. Generally, I take a discount rate at the rate 12%. If you're saying at the rate 12%, I'm taking same discount rate, present value factor, same for all, but it not necessarily be the same. My discount rate could be 12% here. The second year, my risk could be higher or lower. It could be 15%, it could be 18%, or it could be 8%. So the discount rate can actually change in each year. Now my present value factor could also change, but in practice we use a single rate. So this is just for your head. Okay, on your concept, on your brain, I'm telling you, it could be different. So the discount rate, even though we are taking one single required rate of return, it could be different at different point in time. But in our computation, we assume it to be just single rate. So if you look at this computation, you can see that my 5-year cash flows, I have different discount rate given here. So I have initially taken 2% as the discount rate, and for the year 5, 6%. So my present value factor would differentiate in each cases. How do you compute present value factor? 1 divided by 1 plus r power n. So remember this formula, right? 1 divided by 1 plus r power n. So which means in year 1, I would have discounted it by 1 divided by 1 plus 0.02 to power n 1. But at the year 5, I would have done 1 divided by 1 plus 0.06 to the power 5. So all these discount rates are not same for all the discounting rate. It is different for different years. But in general cases, we don't have this computation in all the questions. We just take an average of this and take just one discount rate and apply it to each year. So if you do this computation, you can understand that the present value of discounted cash flow would be 1255. Instead of that, you know how to compute present value of cash flows. You will have, the method is very simple. You will have years. You can either do it in horizontal ways or you can do it in vertical ways. You will have years, you will have the cash flow, you will have discount rate, you will have present value factor and discounted cash flow. If the discount rate is same for all the years, we will just take present value factor at this discount rate. Then we will multiply the cash flow with the discounted discount rate or present value factor. Then we would get discounted cash flow. The sum of discounted cash flow would be the present value. This is something that we already know. Instead of that, if I can use single cash flow, single discount rate, if I'm taking 5% on an average, we get approximately the same number. So I'm saying that the discount rate can be different, depends upon what's the required rate of return at different point in time. The market is performing really nice, somebody will have a lesser required rate of return. If the market is going really down, then they might expect a little more. So it can all depends on multiple factors, but you have to understand that in examination we are going to use only one single rate for all the computation. So you do have, depends upon what cash flow they are giving, your discount rate also would change. You do have something called as real cash flow and nominal cash flow. Real cash flows is after you adjust your nominal cash flow for inflation differences. Say for example, 2000 rupees is the nominal cash flow for a year, but the real cash flow for that year could be 1800. So if I'm having real cash flow taken into consideration for determining present value, then my discount rate also should be reduced to the tune of inflation. Are you understanding? I cannot have multiple impact on my discounting. So I will have to see what is the cash flow that I'm taking. If the cash flow is real cash flow, then I will have to have a discount rate which can be applied on real cash flow, which is adjusted for. Discount rate also should get adjusted for inflation if cash flow is adjusted. If cash flow is nominal cash flow, then my discount rate also considers the inflation. This is what this is just an understanding that we need to have based on the entire present value computation. The whole logic is saying we have cash flow, we have discount rate, we have present value factor, we need to have discounted cash flow. If the cash flow itself is adjusted, then my discount rate also require an adjustment. So I can have two type of cash flow: real cash flow, nominal cash flow. But we take nominal cash flows. So the summary for this discussion was, we discussed what's the concept of valuation. What's that one word which was very important for us to understand? Value, or we said there are two kind of value, which is market value, market price, and intrinsic value. The intrinsic value, how do we compute intrinsic value? We say intrinsic value is nothing but it is the present value of all your future cash flows. What are the two type of future cash flows we have? One is periodic returns, another one is redemption value. Then we discussed about the concept of required rate of return and expected rate of return. We also discussed what is the meaning of equity risk premium. So what are the formulas that we have discussed? One formula was, what are the formulas that we had? We had a formula on expected return. We had a formula on what is cost of capital. We had a formula on what is equity risk premium. So we will have to have, we already have a separate notes where you would have written the formulas. Now let's look at the next session. Okay, so in this particular presentation, I'm going to discuss what are the methods for your equity valuation, what are the approaches that we have. We're going to discuss, there are three major models that we have, and in each model we have multiple types of computation as well. First model, which is very simple for us to understand and then analyze and then do the computation, is called as dividend based computation or dividend based model. Then we do have earnings based models. We also have cash flow based models. These are the three models that we are going to discuss with relating to equity valuation. So what's the real understanding of it? The very basic concept. I told you the concept remains the same for all the computation. So what will be different is only the formulas will be different and computation mechanism could be different, but the concept remains the same. So what do you mean by value? Value is nothing but present value of future cash flows. That is something that I have fixed on my head already. So present value of future cash flows. The future cash flows can be different. In dividend based model, what is that I'm going to take as my cash flow? I'm going to take dividend as my cash flow and I'll discount dividend. Earnings based model, instead of dividend, I'll take earnings. Okay, I'll take profit after tax. In cash flow based model, I compute something called as free cash flow. Okay, and these days, no, they are trying to ask you questions on free cash flow based models, which actually is the 8 mark kind of questions. Because dividend and earnings is like one simple formula and you will get the answer. They're still asking for 4 marks and all that, but that's still you'll be easily getting that particular answer. But cash flow based model requires you to compute. Yeah. So that's the model we will use generally for practically to compute the values. And we call it discounted cash flow model using free cash flow for equity of 4. I'll tell you exactly how that is to be computed as well. So we'll start with our dividend based model. So every model has some backing assumptions. Assumption number one, dividends are paid annually. Why we are taking this assumption? You should, by now, if you're good at discounting, then you should be already getting this concept on your head. So basically, what you're trying to do, you're trying to discount your cash flows. In dividend based model, what is the cash flow that you're taking? You're taking dividend as the cash flow. Now, if I'm taking dividends are paid in different period of any year, my discounting will be very difficult because when I'm discounting with a rate, I'm discounting it for 1 year. So I will have to definitely assume that dividend gets credited to your account at the end of a particular year. Okay, so I first assumed dividends are paid annually. So annual dividend is first assumption. Second assumption, first payment of dividend comes not when you are purchasing the share, it comes at the end of the period, which means that you wanted to keep a keep a discounting which is considered to be at the end of the year. Okay, so that is also important for you to discount it so that the first year cash flow comes at the end of the year. I can discount it for 1 year. Second one, sale of equity shares at the end of the year at an ex dividend price. So you're assuming that you're selling the equity shares at the end of an year. Any year, the sale of redemption also happens at the end of a particular period, and that price that we have for sale is ex dividend price. What do you mean by ex dividend price? That price does not have the component of dividend. So it's after you issue the dividend. So the price does not have a dividend component inside it. So that will affect our cash flows once again. So we are saying that sale also happens, the redemption also happens at the end of the year, and it's an ex dividend price. These are the three assumptions in which we have developed dividend based model. Now we have different type of valuation. One is called a single period valuation, which is that we are going to hold the share only for 1 year. So one set of cash flow, one set of redemption value, and we will be able to compute the present value. Or I can have multi-period, which is more than 1 year I'll have my cash flows coming up. So if more than 1 year my cash flow comes up, then I need to know how my cash flow is going to grow over the period and how my discounting rate is going to affect over the period. All these additional things will come when you're taking multi-period. Single period valuation is very, very simple. Okay, let's directly jump onto an example so that you will have this understanding correct. Shares of 1 year limited is expected to be sold at 60 with a dividend of 6 after 1 year. Required rate of return is 20%, then what will be the share price? I want you to read the question at your end. Only 1 year. That's why 1 year limited. Single period valuation. I'm trying to take from the very basic understanding. Shares of 1 year limited is expected to be sold at 60 with a dividend of 6 after 1 year. If required rate of return is 20%, then what will be the share price? Now, how do you compute share price? It is present value of future cash flows. Now, what is the future cash flows we have? How many years we have? Just single period, 1 year. I need to discount 60 as well as 6. What is the discount rate I should use? I should use the discount rate of 20%. Very simple computation. You compute and tell me what will be the present value. Then I'll do computation. I'll write the formula also, which you can write. So if the chat box is not working, then you will have to type on the WhatsApp. Okay, I'm checking both parallelly. Yeah, I'm insisting on this because I don't want to miss out on that interaction aspect. Then now the live classes and recorded become same. Don't want that, right? It's 55. Okay, I think everybody is getting 55. 54 point. Okay, fine. I grade it's the same. Okay, so let's put the formula. We'll write the formula also first. So what is the computation? So first you will have to write. Next subheading would be equity valuation models. What are the types of model I have? I have three models. Dividend based, earnings based, cash flow based. Out of that, I want you to copy this parallelly. Okay, out of the first one, dividend based model, point number one, single period valuation, value of a share today is equal to dividend for the year one, price at year one divided by 1 plus A. This is the formula. Dividend at the end of the year one plus price at the end of year one divided by 1 plus cost of capital or required rate of return. P1 dividend at year 1. P1 price at year 1. K cost of capital. Once you copy, you should give me a yes, okay, so that I can go ahead. Okay. So in this particular example, what is value? P1 plus P1 divided by 1 plus K. That will be 6 plus 60 divided by 1 plus 0.20, which will give you 66 divided by 1.2, which is 55 if I'm not wrong. Correct, right? So what is that we have done here? We've already written the formula, so you can actually number the formula for chapter wise. I have given number based on my presentation, but I think it is better that you give number based on the chapter. So in this chapter, this is formula number 3 or something, so you can put it somewhere at the end of it. We can do it, write all the formula, then go back and then number it, so that we know by the end of a chapter how many formulas we do have to learn. And these are all not really formulas, these are all very basic concepts. think you've already done the computation, so it's not formula that I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the concept once again. So I want year 0 value. What am I doing? I have information available for year 1. What are the information? One is, I know what is my cash flow, which is 6. Here the cash flow we have taken, because it's dividend model, dividend is the cash flow. Now I know the redemption value is going to be 60. What I have to do, these information I'll have to take to present value. Now to do a present value, I need a present value factor. For that I require a discount rate. What is the discount rate for us? K is the discount rate. So whatever information I have at year 1, I'm discounting back to present value. Now if it's not year 1, at year 2, I'll have to discount it for 2 years and then bring it to present value. That will be my valuation. So this is the method in which we are going to value throughout. It's going to be very simple. Now let's look at what is multi-period valuation, because in multi-period also I have different approaches. There are 3 models possible in multi-period valuation, which are as follows: no growth in dividend, constant growth in dividend, variable growth in dividend. Now at year 1 it is very simple. If it's just 1 year, I can see what is the dividend I'm going to get at the end of next year and what will be the redemption value. I discount it, I'll get what will be the value today. Simple. Now say for example, if I'm having more than 1 year, there are different, which we call as multi-period valuation. When I'm looking into multi-period valuation, I cannot always say that, okay, there is one option. I'm saying that I'm having constant dividend model. Okay, constant dividend model means I have same dividend for the next 5 years. So same cash flow for the next 5 years. And at the end of 5th year, I'll have a redemption value. Now I discount everything, I'll get the present value, which is the first model, first method, which is called as no growth in dividend. So there's no growth in dividend that's happening. So same dividend is for another 5 years. I'll have to again discount and create the present value. Second is, which is very unlikely, right? The dividend has to grow. The investor will not be ready to take the same dividend for every year. They will expect the dividend to grow. The company should make more profit. There should be growth. And for that sake, they're saying that, okay, then second model comes into picture, which is called as constant growth in dividend. So the dividend is growing, but dividend is growing at a constant rate. It's the same growth rate. So this year dividend is 10 rupees and growth rate is considered to be 10%. Then next year dividend is going to be 11 rupees. So next year dividend is going to be 12.1 rupees. So 10% is the growth that is going to happen for every year. This is called as constant growth in dividend. So the period is not 1 year, it is more than 1 year. It can even go to perpetuity. For an infinite period of time, that kind of computation is also possible. Then next is variable growth in dividend. So which says that, okay, there is dividend, there is more than 1 year, and there is growth, but it's not going to be constant growth. We are going to have different period, different growth, which we will have to compute a different set of cash flow. There are different models for that. So let's first go to multi-period valuation. An example question. Let's read the question. Okay, so this is multi-period valuation. So I have more than one period. I do have a different set of cash flows coming. I'll have to compute what will be the value. Okay. An investor is looking for a 4-year investment. The share of the company is selling for 75. They have plans to pay dividend of rupees 7.5 per share at the end of first and second years, and 9 and 15 respectively at the end of third and fourth year. If the investor capitalization rate is 12%, so there could be different terms for discount rate, required rate of return, cost of capital, investment capitalization rate, IRR. There are different terms they use. So in the question, we will have to find out what would be the discount rate. They would have given some information for that, or they will give risk-free rate and then equity risk premium. This kind of computation you will have to do KE for that. Okay. So, and share price at the end of fourth year is 70. So redemption value is also there. What is the value of share? I want you to compute it. I know that you will compute in an easy direct method, then I'll tell you if the question comes in how the presentation should be like. Because we know how cash flows are presented in capital budgeting. Same presentation is what I suggest here. Please go ahead and then compute and let me know the value. Because if you don't compute at your end, no, then it'll all be like watching movies. That's not what we are here for. I'm waiting for the value. Then whether it is desirable, we will check. 'Faster, guys, faster. You guys can do it faster. At some point, no, when we are reaching a little more far with bigger questions, we should also put a timing for our questions. We should be super fast in solving it. 73.1. Okay, somewhere close to that, everybody's getting. Okay, now let me chip in and then do the computation. So first we will have to arrange the information. D1 and D2, dividend for the first year and second year is 7.5, and D3 is 9 and D4 is 15. What is the value at the end of fourth year? It is 70. My discount rate is, you don't need to write this, okay? That is only for me to just take from the question. 12%. So this is the computation information I have. So we will have a heading for every computation question. You will have a computation heading. Computation of value. We will have year, cash flow, amount, present value factor at 12%, discounted cash flow. You guys have to help me with the present value factor. Please quickly type on the chat box what's the present value factor, how many years I have. So year 1, 2, 3, 4 I have. Cash flow is 7.5, 7.5, 9. Last year was 15. At the end of year 4, sorry. This is not something I should write here. Something I should write here. 7.5, 7.5, 9, 15. What is this? This is dividend. And then we have redemption value, which is 70. Now I'll have my present value factor here, my discounted cash flows. Each present value factor I'll have to write, then discounted cash flow, then I'll get what is the present value of discounted cash flow, which is 73.143. That will be the value of my share. This is how your presentation should look like. Show you the computation. Okay. You can see here, it is the same dividend I have given, amount of inflow, present value factor, and I have discounted. Okay, now we will have to look at the question if it is asking for any other information. Yes, it is asking one more information. What is that other information it is asking? Would it be desirable an investment? So we will have to look at, an investor is looking for 4-year investment. The share of the company is right now selling at 75. So your market price, 75, your intrinsic value, 73.143. It is overpriced or underpriced? It is overpriced. So market price is higher than its intrinsic value, hence not desirable to invest. Because it's, what is the real value? 73. What is the market price that you will have to pay? You will have to pay 75, which means that you're going to earn less than 12% return if you invest in this particular stock. So is it desirable to invest? It is not. Are you guys understanding this concept, guys? So now we have other models, like we will have to just add growth and we will have to just have different growth. So all the model remains the same. Like we have very simple additions here and there. So once you get the concept, okay, all I have to do is just discount the cash flows and bring it to present value. Once you get on the real use of discount rate, if you have this understanding in your head, then the entire valuation till earnings based valuation is like a cakewalk for you. But cash flow, you should know how cash flow generated in a company. That is an additional requirement, little bit of accounting knowledge. Then that is also going to be very simple. It's going to be very easy work for you. So I think I've crossed my 845 marks and now Swati will ask me to stop. So I'm going to wind up now. And we will just quickly recap what are the things that we have discussed and what are the formulas that we had. So we basically went on to discuss few concepts. One very important concept, what is value. Second point of discussion that we had was few terms, like we have discussed terms relating to returns. We discussed what is an expected return, what is the required rate of return. Then we have discussed something called as equity risk premium. Then we discussed about discount rate and what we have to do when cash flow changes. Then we discussed about the models. What are the 3 models that we have? One is dividend based, earnings based, and free cash flow based. In dividend based itself, we have 2 periods. One is single period, another one is multi period. Now what will be the formula for single period? It will be dividend at the end of 1 year, D1 plus P1 divided by 1 plus K. So what is the formula for? Let's write the formula also. Multi period constant dividend. Second one is multi period model. Let's write this also. Please copy. I don't think we have written the formula. Concept we know. Formula is just for the namesake. Okay. This formula, if it's not there, no problem. Multi-period dividend valuation model, constant dividend model, or no growth. Value today will be E1 divided by 1 plus ke power 1 plus E2 divided by 1 plus ke power 2. Likewise, I'll have to go. The last year I'll have dividend for the nth period. I'll also have the price of the share for the nth period, and I'll have to discount it with ke power n. This will be the formula that I have. Tn for last year. Tn redemption value. Please keep this also as a formula inside your formula book. Once you say yes, and we can close our session. Okay, wonderful. So thank you for your patient listening. I know that we had few of our students who are not able to attend. So I have parallelly recorded this, so I can put it on YouTube link, so I can share it out. I'll check if Akshay has that option. But anyway, I'll share it on the group right now itself. Okay, I'll just close it and then do that process. Okay, so I'll see you day after tomorrow, and then discuss the rest of valuation. Before that, I'll give you the notes also, so that you can look at all the questions at your end as well, because I've just pressed through some example questions. You will have to compute the real questions, so all the questions also I'll include there.